Good day, everyone. Welcome again to Education 505 Research Seminar and Practicum. In this video lecture, I will discuss the topic how to write the background of the study part 3. The main content of this video lecture are the following. I will discuss the styles or models of writing in terms of structure and a discussion on a sample of a well-written background of the study using the inductive style of writing. And please note that this is going to be the last part of a series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study. And as if you have watched the first part and second part of this video lecture, in the first part, I discussed the meaning, nature, dynamics, core elements of a background of the study, and some important techniques on how to write the background of the study. And then I presented in part 2 an excellent sample of a background of the study written using the deductive style of writing. So so that for you to fully make sense of this discussion, in case you have not watched part 1 and part 2, I encourage you to watch it so that again you will be able to follow the discussion here and you will be able to fully make sense of the important point that I will be sharing with you in this video lecture. For your convenience, I provided in the description box below the links to these video lectures, again on part 1 and part 2. So let's start. Again, as you can see, there are two major parts of the discussion in this video lecture. The first one is on the styles or models of writing in terms of structure. And second major part is a sample of a well-written background of the study using the inductive style of writing. And then okay. So as I presented in part 2, we have here a slide on the two styles of writing or styles or models of writing in terms of structure. If you use the inductive style of writing, you have the model of a sitting cat with the complete parts. We have the head, body, and the tail. And as you can see here, what you need to write in the opening paragraph or paragraphs, in case you have more than one paragraph in your introductory part, are the following major points. The main goal of your proposed research, and then the research problem or the research gap, and the thesis statement. So that will constitute the head of the cat, or this is going to be your introduction, the opening paragraph or paragraphs of your background of the study. And then after you have successfully articulated in the opening paragraph the main goal, the research problem or gap, and the thesis statement of your proposed research or your thesis as a whole, then in the body you discuss the justifications to the main or bold claims or arguments you introduce in the opening paragraph. As you can see, the thesis statement that you need to articulate in the opening paragraph is in a form of an argument or a contention or the main position of the thesis. So you have bold claims or you have a huge claim in the opening paragraph. What you need to write in the body using the inductive style of writing are the justifications to those claims. Don't worry, in the second half or in the other parts or the next topic for this video lecture, I will present again a sample, beautiful, an excellent, beautifully written background of the study using the inductive style of writing. So you will be able to understand or get my point when I present and discuss the sample of the background of the study written using the inductive style. And then after you provided all the justifications to your claim, that you need to develop in the body of the cards, in the body of your background of the study. Then you need to write now the concluding parts. This is represented by the tail of the card. So the concluding parts of your background of the study using the deductive style of writing simply rehashes the main goal of the research and then the rational or the reason or the compelling reason why you wish to pursue this study. So it is just a rehashing of the tail is just a rehashing of the head of the cat, but framed differently so that it will not appear to be banal or repetitive. The deductive style of writing, on the other hand, has the model of a sitting cat without the head. As I explained in the second part, in part 2 of this series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study, I said this is a bit difficult because the deductive style of writing is a bit difficult because, as you can see, we don't have the head of the cat here. In other words, we don't have the introduction that will guide us or that will set the tone of the discussion, but the writer, the author, the researcher presents right away the problem that the researcher wants to see addressed in the paper, or the problem or the gap that he or she wants to fill, as well as its context and justifications. So this is a bit difficult because it requires some skills in writing. Most especially the skill or the ability to present your arguments or to present your thought in a coherent and logical manner. Because without the head, without the opening paragraphs, like in the inductive style of writing, scholars, especially young scholars, have the tendency to argue, to write in a repetitive, circular manner, to the point that we don't see the logic or we don't see coherence, we don't observe coherence in the writing of the body of the background of the study. But for an excellent background of the study written using the deductive style, you may refer to part of this series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study, because I presented and discussed and explained in full how my advisee wrote her background of the study using the deductive style of writing. And then after, so again, in the deductive style of writing, the researcher discussed right away, or the author discussed right away the research problem or gap that he or she wants to see addressed in the paper, and as well as the context and justification to his or her arguments. And after that, yeah, it's only when we have, or the author or the researcher has articulated or discussed the problem as well as the context and justification, that in the concluding part, he or she articulates the main goal, the thesis statements, and the rationale of the study. So as you can see in the inductive style of writing, in the head of the cuts, we discuss right away we articulated right away the the research problem or gap, and the research goal, and the thesis statements. And then again, we proceed to the discussion of the justification in the body of the cards, and then conclusion. Here, we don't start with the main goal, because again, obviously we don't have the head of the cards, we don't have the introductory part like in the inductive style of writing. So it's only in the conclusion, using in the deductive style of writing, that we articulate the main goal of the research, the thesis statements, and the rationale of this study. And then before I proceed to the sample, to the next part of this video lecture, I should not miss sharing with you why we need to have the structure, why we need to have the style of writing. First is that if you are familiar with these two styles or modes of writing in terms of structure, the first advantage or yeah, advantage of knowing this or structuring your writing, not just the background of the study, but any other section of your thesis, literature review, methodology, and things like that. You always have this structure. Well, first advantage is you will be able to present your thoughts in a coherent and logical manner. So as you can see, there are steps here. Now, there are parts to address in writing the part of your thesis or dissertation. So again, if you use the inductive style of writing, you know right away that what you need to do is discuss right away the research goal and the research problem, or you start with the research problem, the research goal, and then the thesis statements. That's what you need to do in the opening paragraphs of your background of the study written using the inductive style. And after that, you know exactly what to do next. So after the introductory parts, then I will proceed with a discussion on the justifications, proofs to my claim in the opening paragraph. And then after I have presented all the proofs, all the justifications, then I will close the discussion by developing the concluding parts, the tail of the cut. In the case of the deductive style of writing, you know too well that you need to discuss first the context and justification, or you need to discuss right away the problem or the research problem or research goal that you want to see, the research problem or research gap that you want to see addressed in the paper. And then you need, and then you know that you're going to discuss the context as well and justification. And then after that, it's only when you develop in detail the research goal, the thesis statements, and the thesis statements and the research goal and the thesis statements. Okay, so again, if you know these two styles or models of writing in terms of structure, and you will be able to present first. You will be able to present your thoughts in a logical manner, and second is you will not get stuck along the way. As we maybe you're familiar with some of the most common complaints of writers, especially fledgling scholars or young writers or young researchers. They complain that when they start writing and when they just stare at the blank screen of their computer or laptop, they complain that they get lost along the way. They could not proceed anymore because there's no ideas. There are no ideas coming out. I explained that in my previous discussions. One of the reasons is that because they don't have the plan on what to do next. So with this styles or models of writing in terms of structure, you get to have the plan in writing your piece of literature, be it a background of the study or methodology or a review of related literature. Okay, so second advantage for knowing these two styles or models of writing in terms of structure is that you will not get lost or get stuck along the way in writing your background of the study or in writing any other parts of your thesis or research paper as a whole. And then third major reason or advantage for writing your piece of your scholarly piece or your background of the study using either of these two styles of writing or styles or models of writing in terms of structure is that since you know exactly what to write, and expert reviewers and expert thesis committee members know what to look for when they review your background of the study. So if for example, if I see it in a thesis defense, and so if I see it in a thesis defense and when I read or review the paper, of course, we start with the background of the study. That's the first part of your thesis proposal or thesis as a whole. And then I'll, as a panel member, I'll be looking for this points, for these core elements. So as a researcher, as a relatively expert on this part, I should say that when I read papers, thesis proposals, or dissertation proposals of my students' masters, both masters and PhD, I know right away if you know the paper is going to receive a minor revision or a major revision from my end. So if these core elements are not found in the paper, in the background of the study, or in the rationale of the study, if the researcher, if the master's or PhD students did not articulate these points in the background of the study, then that sends a signal to me that the researcher does not know what she or he is doing. And so I will review the paper thoroughly, and the researcher will receive uh, either a minor revision or a major revision from my end. Because again, as reviewers, I know what to look for in the background of the study. And these are the points that I'll be looking for when I review your background of the study. And so, again, to avoid receiving major revision as a main recommendation from your panel, then you have to write it according to this plan. Okay. And those are just some of the major advantages for coming up with, or for writing your research paper based on these two structures. Okay. And in the next part, I will now present an excellent sample of a background of the study written using the inductive style of writing. Again, for those who have not watched part 2 of this series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study using on how to write the background of the study, in part 2 I discussed the deductive style of writing and presented an excellent, beautifully written background of the study using the deductive style. And in this video lecture, I will now proceed to the presentation and discussion of a background of the study using the inductive style of writing. Okay. So I'll start sharing and share this one. Okay, so before I proceed, please note that this is the background of the study of one of my advices. She is one of the best advices that I had. And please note as well that in part 1 of the series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study, I presented almost the same inputs, although I just replaced Granha Kalinawa National High School with senior high school students or senior high schools in New Zealand. Anyway, the main difference here is the main difference between part 3 and part 1 is that I used this sample in part 1 when I discussed the important techniques in writing the background of the study. So I'll be repeating, of course, the inputs, the write-up of my advice, but this time I am presenting it as a sample of a background of the study written using the inductive style of writing. And so, yeah, I will. And another thing to remember is that this is draft 1, as you can see here in the top left side of the screen, you have it there, the file name of this paper. It reads Lailani Draft 1. So meaning to say, this is the first draft of the background of the study of my advisee. And then after showing this very briefly to you, I will share another version of this paper, the fourth draft, the nearly perfect draft of this background of the study. So as you can see, we revised this paper 5 times. And so what happened was, after we discuss problem formulation and gap spotting, because again, you cannot start writing your background of the study if you don't have a research problem or research gap to address. So the starting points, the first step in any research paper, in any research endeavor rather, is to formulate the problem that you want to see addressed in your research, or to identify the research gap. So after we discuss the problem that my advisee wants to see addressed in her proposed research, and then after we came up with a researchable problem, then I asked her to read literature, a lot of literature in relation to her topic, and then I also asked her to conduct initial interviews and observations so that she would have reliable inputs, ideas, information when she start writing the background of the study. So again, we did conduct discussion on problem formulation. We discussed and approved her research problem or research gap. Now, once we have identified the research gap, I asked her to write the background of the study, and this is her first draft. And so, as you can see, normally for the first draft, I always have comments. Like in the introductory part, I said we will talk about it later, so consider deleting it for the meantime. And then as you can see the text here, I do some editing and proofreading, because as advisor, of course, it is our responsibility to review the work of our advisee, and it's also our responsibility to do some editing and proofreading and add ideas or even phrases or sentences. Because as I mentioned in part 2 of this, again, series of video lectures on how to write a background of the study, I mentioned there that the thesis or the thesis or dissertation is a co-authorship between the researcher and the advisor. But the rule of thumb is the advisor can contribute as much as or a maximum of 20% only. That's the rule of thumb. And so that we can call that, what the researcher is doing is really an independent study. She should, or he should contribute at least 80% of the entire thesis. And so again, it's a co-authorship. A thesis or a dissertation is a co-authorship between the researcher and the advisor. That is why, as you notice, when the thesis is done and if the researcher wishes to publish the paper, the advisor is always a co-author, as you noticed, right? Because again, the thesis or dissertation is a co-authorship between the researcher and the advisor. But please take note that if you decide to publish your thesis or dissertation in the future, you have to see to it that your name as the researcher should appear as the first name in the list of authors if it's going to be a journal article, because the understanding is that the first name that appears in the list of authors in a journal article or a book is the principal investigator. So if I am the advisor, and we publish the paper of my advisee, but I put my name as the first, as the first in the list of authors. Then I'm doing an unethical thing, because I'm claiming I'm the principal researcher in the investigator in that case. So again, just an advice for researchers, young researchers out there: when you publish a thesis or dissertation, see to it that, and if the advisor demands co-authorship, please see to it that your name should appear as the first, um, in the list of co-authors, because you are the principal investigator for that purpose. And then, as you can see, so yeah, going back to the text, I made some editing and proofreading and things like that. And this is how I'm showing with you how this is how I review the thesis or paper of my advisees. And this is also how, when I am requested to review papers for journal article, I do exactly this, making some editing and proofreading. And in the case of a thesis or dissertation, as you can see here, I inserted, sentences, phrases for the for my advisee to follow or not. So I'm just inserting these statements are up for grab, meaning to say my advisee may or may not follow my suggestion or my recommendation, but at least with that comment, he or she is guided properly. But most of the time, my advisee will accept my insertion here, my suggestion. And so, again, I'm justified in doing this as an advisor. I inserted few sentences here. I'm justified in doing this because, again, the thesis or dissertation is a co-authorship between me, the advisor, and the researcher. Okay, so again and again and again, I just need to see to it that my contribution will not go beyond 20%. That's the rules, according to my mentors, of course, in the past. And then after that, as you can see, I have a lot of comments here. I asked my advisee to delete this paragraph. I wrote here the side comments. The first and second paragraphs are a bit short, hence you can easily incorporate this paragraph to the previous one, or I asked her to incorporate this in the previous one. And then, as you can see, so here, so I have comments and suggestions and insertion. I have a lot of editing and proofreading, and then I inserted another sentence. You see, I'm contributing something to the paper, so I may claim co-authorship at the end of the day when we publish this paper soon or in the future. And then, as you can see, as we proceed, so I have a lot of editing here, proofreading, and blah 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 blah. So that's the first draft of my background of the first draft of this background of the study. So let me proceed now to the discussion, presentation and discussion on the second to the last version draft of this background of the study. So I will present and we will discuss. But before that, again, just like what I did in the in part 2, I present with you the plan in writing the background of the study. So again, after this, I will present draft 4, or second to the last draft of the background of the study that I had just presented. I will read the paper and do some side discussion, read, explain, do some side discussion. But before that, so that you will be guided properly how we develop the background of the study. This is I present with you the outline of that, background of the study. So this is the outline of the background of the study that I will present now after this. So I color because we will be using the inductive style of writing this background of the study. So remember again the model of a sitting cat for the style of writing is that we have the sitting cat with the complete parts: the head, the body, and the tail. So inductive style of writing, and the text in red are the points, the element that we will discuss in the opening paragraph or paragraphs of the background of the study. This represents the head of the cat. And then after articulating this points in the head of the cat, then we proceed to the body of the cat, the justifications to the main arguments presented in the previous or opening paragraph. And then after that, we discuss or we present the concluding paragraph, the tail of the cat, where we simply rehash the research gap or problem that we want to see addressed in the paper, and then the research goal and the thesis statement. So you see, as I explained as well in part 2, you need to have the plan, you need to have the outline so that you won't get stuck along the way, so that you will be guided properly in writing this part. Not just this part, but in all other parts of your thesis or dissertation. There should be an outline. And again, after we conducted the discussion, after we did some problem formulation or gap spotting, in other words, after we discussed and approved my advice's research problem or gap, I asked her to I asked her to read literature and conduct initial interviews and observations so that she would have inputs or ideas or information when writing this part. And part of that is, before I gave her the go signal to start writing the background of the study, I also asked this outline. So I asked her to submit the outline, and then we discuss it. So we discussed the outline. So this is what we came up with. The outline is quite long. The outline that she submitted to me was quite long. We removed the unnecessary parts because, well, we could include those parts, but we're just wasting time because the background of the study doesn't have to be too long. So 3 to 5 pages are enough for the background of the study. What's important is we're able to explain all, the major points that readers or thesis committee members or panel members are looking for when reviewing the background of the study. So that's it. So with this guide, my advisee again is able to write her background of the study in a logical and coherent manner. She did not get lost along the way because she knows what to do next after writing this part. She knows what to do next, and so on and so forth. And plus with my guidance, my review, and editing and insertions of some thoughts and statements and sentences, she was able to come up with an excellent background of the study written using the inductive style of writing. So with this, so remember this outline. So with this outline, we may now proceed to the presentation of the fourth draft of this background of the study written using the inductive style of writing. So before I read and discuss, I would just like to run you through this very briefly. So this is going to be the opening paragraph. We only have one opening paragraph. This is going to be the introductory paragraph or the opening paragraph. This is going to be the head of the cut, where we discuss the research problem and then articulate the research goal and the thesis statements or the compelling reasons as to why there's a need to pursue this research. This is the head of the cut. And then this is going to be the body of the gut, or the body of the background of the study. And this is going to be the tail, or the concluding paragraph. So let me now read and do some side discussion is possible. Okay, so the working title of this research is Lived Experiences of Granha Kalinawan National High School Grade 10 Students with Mathematical Anxiety. Working title because we will change. We will see, we will working title because this may change after we have conducted the entire research. And so the working title is the last part of the thesis or dissertation that the advisor and the researcher will work, or will discuss, because the idea is after we have completed the research, there might be changes along the way. There might be additions or changes that will no longer be captured by the working title. So that is why we will work on the we will we will tweak the title a bit. So we will tweak the title once we have completed the research. And for that purpose, I will record again. I will record another video lecture on how to formulate your research title. There is a technique also on how to do that, and most young scholars, commit mistakes in framing their working title or the research title. I will again come up with a video lecture on that. Okay, so let's start. I will read now the head of the cut, or the opening paragraphs. So going back to the outline, what we we will be presenting in the opening paragraph are the meaning and nature of mathematical anxiety. That's the first point that we will present. The second is what happens if the problem of mathematical anxiety is not addressed, and then articulation of the research gap or problem, the research goal, and the thesis statements. So as you can see, we started with a definition of the background, with the definition of mathematical anxiety. Here there are no stiff rules to follow, of course, but the idea why we started with the definition of the term mathematical anxiety is that mathematical anxiety is a specific is a nuanced term, is a jargon that is highly specific to mathematics people. And so if you talk about mathematical anxiety to engineering people, or history, or to the philosophers, of course we know what mathematical is and we understand what anxiety is. But when it comes to the specificity of the term mathematical anxiety, we non-specialists in mathematics cannot easily understand that one. And so since the idea is, since we are writing not just for our panel members in a thesis or dissertation proposal, we are not just writing for them, but we are writing for the global leadership, especially when we publish the outputs of this research, our outputs, especially in an online journal. This will become available to a global reader. This will be available to Africa, the United States, Australia, Germany, and name it. And this will be available to people outside the discipline, to the non-specialists, so to speak. So since one of our obligations as scholars, as writers in scholarly writing is we write from the vantage points of the reader. In other words, we see to it that our readers understand what we're talking about, and so it is but proper to start the discussion, the writing of the background of the study with the definition of the term mathematical anxiety. Okay, so the first sentence reads, mathematical anxiety refers to the individual's unpleasant emotional mood responses when confronted with a mathematical situation. And then we added, and then we write there, Arnold's and Perkila 2012, because my advisee did not invent the definition of mathematical anxiety. So we borrow that definition from these authors, and so that's why we decided to avoid plagiarism. And then we continue. Liu specifically identifies some of the manifestations of this type of anxiety, which include but not limited to depression, helplessness, nervousness, and fearfulness in doing mathematical and numerical tasks. So aside from the meaning of the word mathematical anxiety, we very briefly explain, or yeah, we very briefly discuss in the second sentence the nature and dynamics of mathematical anxiety. And then since we are writing the background of the study using the inductive style of writing, after the meaning, nature, after the brief discussion of the meaning, nature, and dynamics of mathematical anxiety, we proceed right away to the discussion, or we proceed right away to the articulation of the research problem. So again, even if in this part of the series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study, even if this part is quite similar to part one, because I just presented the same material, but here I presented this materials because we are writing this using the deductive style of writing. So I hope you can see the difference now. So this is the meaning of mathematical anxiety. And the second sentence, we briefly discuss the nature and dynamics of mathematical anxiety. And then in the next paragraph, we now present the problem. Okay, so let me continue. Notably, if left to rule unchecked, this problem, mathematical anxiety, this problem will expand and create a total avoidance pattern on the part of the students, which can be expressed most visibly in the form of cutting classes and habitual absenteeism. As we can see, this will definitely affect the achievement of students in mathematics performance. So this is an articulation of the initial articulation of the research gap. And then in the next sentence, we provided some justification to that, or proof to that. Then we say, in fact, the study conducted by Luttenberger, Wimmer, and Peichter revealed that the outcomes of mathematical anxiety are not only limited to students' performance in math-related situations. It can also have a long-term effect that involves efficient learning, as well as course and even vocational choices. Without a doubt, therefore, mathematical anxiety is a recurring problem for many individuals, which may possibly affect the academic success and future career of the students. So you see, we have a strong problem here. See, here we talk about mathematical anxiety, what mathematical anxiety is, and it's from the meaning itself and its nature and dynamics, we can sense right away that it is really a problem in itself that needs serious consideration. And in the following sentences, we now talk about the problem per se, the research gap per se. So this is how serious the problem of mathematical anxiety is if left unchecked, if we do not address it. So again, meaning, nature, and dynamics of mathematical anxiety very briefly, the first in the item, in the outline, and then we proceed to the discussion of the problem, research problem or research gap, and then we proceed to the research goal, and then the thesis statements. So the research goal for in the next sentence, it reads, hence it is precisely in this context that the researcher aims to determine the lived experiences of those students with mathematical anxiety. In particular, this proposed thesis aims to identify the factors that cause the grade 10 students of Granha Kalinawan National High School to become disinterested in mathematics. So after the research problem, we articulate here the research goal. Okay, problem, research goal. So when we articulate the research goal, the readers know exactly why we are doing that, because we presented, the problem, the research goal. And then after we articulate the research goal, we proceed to the thesis statement. Again, the thesis statement is normally understood as the overall idea of the research. And there are two types of thesis statements, argumentative and expository. So the thesis statement can be the thesis statement sometimes already includes the research goal, and the thesis statement can be framed from the argumentative manner or expository manner. In this case, we presented it in a form of an argument. And so we say, therefore, the researcher argues that there is a need to determine the lived experiences of these students with mathematical anxiety, because knowing and understanding the difficulties and challenges that they have encountered will put the researcher in the best position to offer some alternatives in addressing this problem. So we presented here an overall compelling reason why we want to pursue this research. So you see, with this opening paragraph, our readers know exactly what the topic of the research is, mathematical anxiety, what problem we would want to see addressed in the paper, or what research gap we want to fill in. We know also right away the research goal, and we know right away the thesis statements, the rationale of the study, the compelling reason why we want to pursue this research. So that's the reason why I said the inductive style of writing the background of the study in terms of structure is quite easy to write, because look, there is this steps, or there are these rules to follow, or steps in doing that. So if you know these techniques, these steps, these elements in the inductive style of writing, you can easily produce an excellent background of the study, an excellent literature review, an excellent methodology, an excellent paper. Of course, given that you know the technicalities in writing, like grammars and syntax and things like that. So this is the head of the cat. We will now proceed to the body of the cat, and this is going to be the justification of what we claim in the opening paragraph. So let me continue. According to records and based on the researcher's first-hand experience with her students in Granha Kalinawan National High School, before I proceed, I want to do some side discussion here. We say according to records. Please take notes that if you read this piece of literature, there is not at least one word, one letter, one word, punctuation, and phrase and sentence that appear to be useless. Okay, everything has its role in the paper. What I'm trying to say here is even the use of the phrase according to records. Please take notes that we plan it. Everything here is planned. When we use this word, we planned it. There's a reason behind why we use that phrase. So that again, when we say according to records, we use that phrase because we want to send a signal to our readers, to the panel members, that the ideas, inputs, data that we are talking about here, that we are presenting in the body of the background of the study are factual, are based on facts because we conducted initial data gathering. We read literature, we conducted preliminary interviews and observations. So when we say according to records, we're telling the readers that we go to the library, we go to the to archives, we read and check records of the school, of the office, and things like that. So again, our data are reliable because they are factual, they are based on concrete facts. Let me continue. According to records and based on the researcher's first-hand experience. You see, we say based on the researcher's first-hand experience. We're also sending a signal to our readers, to our thesis committee members or panel members, that aside from the fact that we conducted archival research, for example, or we read literature, or we check documents, we also conducted preliminary interviews and observations. Okay? And please take notes that in research, the primary sources of some of the primary sources of data are interviews and observations. Take note of that. So when we say these things, you cannot question our data. We were there. We observed it. We experienced it firsthand. We checked the records. Yeah. Why doubt? So again, according to records and based on the researcher's first-hand experience with her students in Granha Kalinawa National High School, indeed, there are students who lost interest in mathematics. For one, while having the daily attendance or monitoring of the students in a grade 10 class, it was observation. It was observed that there were students who are not always attending mathematics subjects, but are regularly attending the rest of the required subjects. Okay? The entire paragraph is a strong proof to our claim above, but at this point, I want to initially show you how we provided a justification to our claim in the previous paragraph, in the opening paragraph. So again, the body of the cuts in the inductive style of writing simply the discussion, the presentation and discussion of the justifications to your claim in the opening paragraphs. You see how logical the writing is. So if you write your paper this way, if you have the plan, then you will be able again to present your thoughts in a coherent and logical manner. Unlike young researchers, especially those who are not guided properly by their advisor, they just get thoughts, they just get random thoughts from somewhere to anywhere, to the point that when you read the piece of literature, you know, they are the writing is so disorganized, so messy, and there is no logical presentation flow of the discussion. So at this point, as you can see, it's a very logical. We proceed from one point to another, to another, to another in a logical and coherent manner. Let me continue. As a matter of fact, this phenomenon is also observed in the work of Istonanto. So we read literature, the work of Istonanto. In a study titled Impact of Math Anxiety on Academic Performance in Pre-Calculus of Senior High School, Istonanto found out that, among others, or inter alia, students with mathematical anxiety have the tendency to intentionally prioritize other subjects and commit habitual tardiness and absences. With this initial knowledge in mind, the researcher becomes curious and privately calls the attention of the concerned students one by one. The researcher learned that one of the students who was initially interviewed was not regularly attending his math subject because he believed that he is not good in math, and no matter how he listens to the topic, he will not learn. before I proceed to the next sentence, I also wish to insert this thought that look, if you look at the way we write the background of the study, we write it in a very simple but elegant manner. We write it in a narrative and an argumentative manner. Okay? It's the presentation is quite simple but elegant in a way that it's presented in a coherent and logical manner, and that our readers can easily understand. Okay, so we, as you can see, we don't use highfalutin words and complicated, complex and complicated sentences to the point it becomes highly convoluted simply to with the intention of impressing our readers. We don't do that. So you see, right, in scholarly writing, because we have the obligation to make our readers understand what we really try to say in the piece of literature, in our piece of writing. So we write it in a narrative, argumentative manner, in a simple but elegant manner. Let me continue. Another interviewee also expresses his concern. Another interviewee also expresses his concern when he uttered that he is afraid to get bullied if he failed during recitation or board work. Similarly, another student also mentioned that he was influenced by his friend's perception that mathematics as a subject is hard and that he needs to avoid the subject. And then, because we will be moving to the next paragraph and we will be presenting another proof or justification to our claim in the previous opening paragraph, then we will close the discussion. We know that too well in our high school English composition. Now, when we write a paragraph, we introduce a topic sentence, provide a body, in this case, the body of the cards, and then you close the discussion of that topic before you proceed to the next. That's what we do here. That's what we exactly did here. So we are done with the presentation of the first proofs to our claim. Then we proceed to the next one. But before we proceed to the next one, we close the discussion. We need to have the concluding sentence. That is why we wrote this sentence. Indeed, and indeed is a signifier of a concluding statement. So indeed, thus, hence, therefore, for this reason, things like that. So it reads, indeed, these are concrete proofs that there are some students in Granha Kalinawan National High School who have mathematical anxiety. So again and again and again, in the body of the cards, in the body of your background of the study, what you need to do is present a proof to your claim in the opening paragraphs or the head of the cards. As I mentioned in the second part of this series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study, we need a proof because, as we all know, or as you may already know, statements remain an assumption until we can provide some proofs. So take notes that in the opening paragraph, we argue that there are indeed students in Granha Kalinawan National High School who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. And that is why we want to know their lived experiences, because if this problem is left unchecked, then it may jeopardize the quality of instruction there. It may jeopardize the future career of the students. So that's a huge claim. So the question is, how do you know that there are indeed students in Granha Kalinawan National High School who are experiencing mathematical anxiety? So this is the task of the body of the background of the study. This is the task of the body of the class. We will provide the proofs that indeed there are students there who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. That's what we call the epistemological aspects in research. From the Greek word episteme, which means knowledge, and logos, which means reason or study. Epistemology is that specific branch of philosophy that studies knowledge, and to be specific, the validity of knowledge. And if we talk about validity of knowledge, how do we know that our knowledge is valid, or how do we know that our knowledge is correct, it's true? Just provide the proof. That's exactly what we do here. Right? And another reason why we need to provide some proofs is that, especially in research, is because if if there are no students in Granha Kalinawan National High School who are experiencing mathematical anxiety, then we don't have respondents in the first place. So we have to make sure before we go to the field, before we approve this thesis, before the panel, we have to make sure before the panel or the thesis panel or committee approves this research proposal, the thesis proposal, we have to make sure that there are students in that school who are experiencing mathematical anxiety so that we will have respondents. Okay? And in the first place, if there are no students in Granha Kalinawa National High School who are experiencing mathematical anxiety, then we are formulating a research problem in a vacuum. It's just a product of opinion, and that's not admissible in research. And so that is why, again, we need to provide proofs. And again and again and again, that's our main task in the body of your background of the study. So again, we say here, indeed, these are concrete proofs that there are some students in Granha Kalinawan National High School who have mathematical anxiety. As already hinted above, disinterest or the loss of interest in mathematics is one of the manifestations of mathematical anxiety. We're safe now. There are indeed students in Granha Kalinawan National High School who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. That's proof enough. But we need to push the idea farther. We need to discuss the problem in its totality so that our panel, our readers will no longer have major questions. And so that if they have questions during the defense, it's just minor questions, maybe some clarificatory questions. We will not receive major revision because we did it right. And we have provided them with the basic elements of the background of the study. So we need to push the idea further. We need to explain it in its entirety, holistically. And that is why the next paragraph reads, to validate the information gathered from the interview, you see, we conducted the initial interview, the researcher immediately communicated to other grade 10 teachers handling different subjects and asked permission if she can secretly observe the students during class discussion. So there is the interview and class observation. With the permission of the teachers, the researcher secretly observed the students for several days. On the one hand, the researcher found out that during mathematics time, some students were uneasy. In fact, they showed a feeling of being tensed or anxious while working with numbers and mathematical problems. Some were even afraid to sit in front and appeared to have low self-esteem. While some students at the back were secretly playing with us, while some students at the back were secretly playing with their cellular phones. These students also show remarkable apprehension during board works like trembling hands, nervous laughter, and the like. Evidently, as Finlayson corroborates, emotional symptoms of mathematical anxiety involve feeling of helplessness, lack of confidence, and being nervous from being put on the spot. Now, I want to dwell a bit on this. Citations. We know, of course, that in research we need to cite as many literature as we can as a support to our claim and to show that indeed what we're doing is real research, not just an essay, not just a literary piece. It's research because there are several scholars, many famous scholars, or several famous scholars working on this topic. And there are several scholars, famous scholars, supporting my claim. So as you notice here, the researcher is making some arguments, some claims, big claims. Okay. And please take notes that as I discussed in part two, every time we make a bold claim, every time we make huge arguments, we are making ourselves open to criticism. We are making ourselves vulnerable to criticism. You make a nasty comment on social media, on Facebook, and you will be bashed. Same here. Same in writing. When you make the arguments, scholars in that field will respond to it in a negative or positive manner. And so, since you make a bold claim, and since that's your main task as a researcher, you got to express your own thoughts, your own interpretation of what you have observed, of what you have read. Then you lay it down in an argumentative, narrative manner. But then again, every time you do that, you're making yourself vulnerable to criticism. So to play safe, to be safe from those criticism, and at the same time to show that what you're really saying is factual, is reliable, that's when we cite famous scholars in the field. See? The idea is you make a contention first, you make an argument first, then you look for some supports in a form of, literature, argument from some scholars, or positions, findings by some research institutions. It should be done that way. You make your case first, and then look for a support. Not the other way around, like fledgling scholars normally do. What they normally do is, young scholars, especially the young scholars, fledgling scholars, is they cite a literature and then explain it and make it the body of the research. That should not be the case. Cite and then explain, cite and then explain. It should be the other way around. You make your own case, you explain what you have observed and read, and then look for scholars to support your findings, to support your interpretation. That's what we exactly did here. We say, evidently, as Finlayson corroborates, and so when we make the citation, as Finlayson corroborates, we are showing, or we are sending a signal to our readers, to our thesis committee members, that our findings is similar or the same with the contention of one of the famous scholars in this field, Finlayson in this case. Okay? So that's why we have to cite literature. So as you can see, our background of the study is not replete with a lot of citations. Some would say, Finlayson 2014, okay, 2012, Reyes, 2020. You don't have to do that. Of course, you may do this if it's necessary to do that. That you want to really show that there are several scholars who corroborated your findings, your contention, your position. But if your intention is simply to impress your readers, you need not do that. One source is enough, I should say. So, let me continue. Evidently, as Finlayson corroborates, emotional symptoms of mathematical anxiety involves feeling of helplessness, lack of confidence, and being nervous from being put on the spot. It must be noted that these occasionally extreme emotional reactions are not triggered by provocative procedures. As a matter of fact, there are no personally sensitive questions or intentional manipulations of stress. The teacher simply asks a very simple question, like identifying the parts of the circle. Certainly, this observation also conforms with the study of Ashcraft. You see, we cite another famous scholar in the field to play safe, to play safe, and to make sure to show our readers or panel that indeed, what we're saying is reliable, factual, valid. Again, certainly, this observation also conforms with the study of Ashcroft when he mentions that students with mathematical anxiety show a negative attitude towards math and hold self-perception about their mathematical abilities. On the other hand, when the class had their other subjects, the students show a feeling of excitement. This is what my research, my advisor observed, of course. They even hurried to sit in front and attentively participating in the class discussion without hesitation and without a feeling of being tense or anxious. And then we close the discussion. We will close the discussion in this paragraph because we move to the another proof. And then again, we have the concluding sentence. This open, discuss, close. Open, discuss, close. And it reads, for sure, this is another concrete proof that there are students in Grand Kalinawa National High School who have mathematical anxiety. So two paragraphs, two major proofs to our claim in the opening paragraph that indeed there are students in Grand Kalinawa National High Schools who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. So see, the discussion in this paragraph is not hanging. We closed it, and then we proceed to another proof, which reads, the researcher further verified if the problem is also happening in other sections and whether other mathematics teachers experienced the same observation that the researcher had. This validation or verification is important in establishing credibility of the claim and ensuring reliability and validity of the assertion. In this regard, and then we have the citations, of course, to show that those contentions are coming from them and supported by them, these scholars. In this regard, the researcher attempted to open up this issue of math anxiety during the departmentalized learning action cell, or LAC, a group discussion of educators per quarter with the objective of teaching strategy to develop critical thinking of the students. During the session, one teacher corroborates the researcher's observation that there are indeed students in Grand Kalinawa National High School who have mathematical anxiety. The teacher pointed out that truly there were students who showed no extra effort in mathematics class, in addition to the fact that some students really avoided the subject. In addition, another math teacher expressed her frustrations about these students who have mathematical anxiety. She queries, how can a teacher develop the critical thinking skills or ability of the students if in the first place these students show avoidance and disinterest in mathematics? So with that third paragraph, we are done with the body of the text. We are done with the body of the background of the study. Again, look, this is the body of the cut. This is the justification to our claim in the opening paragraph. Okay? And notice how logical, coherent our discussion is, our writing in this case. Notice as well that the writing is very simple but elegant at the same time. And it is also narrative and argumentative. We make arguments in writing, in scholarly writing, of course. I have to qualify that one because literary writing is another, there are another rules in literary writing. It's rules in literary writing is different from scholarly writing, of course. And so, as you can see here, the writing is argumentative. In scholarly writing, we make arguments, of course. We make contentions, we make claims, interpretations. And narrative, look, the discussion is conversational. The writer is talking to his or her reader. And so as a reader, because the writer is talking to me, addressing me, as a reader, I can easily relate and easily understand what she is talking about. Because in addition to the fact that Again, it's conversational. The writer is talking. To me, it's written in a logical manner. And we don't use highfalutin words. We don't have highly convoluted sentences. It's simple but elegant. Okay? So after discussing the body of the cats, we are now left with the tail of the cats. Take note again, we are writing this background of the study using the inductive style of writing. With the model of a sitting cat, we have the head, body, and the tail. And we are now down with the tail, the concluding paragraph. And then we say, given the aforementioned discussion, it is evident that there are indeed students in Granha Kalinawan National High Schools who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. So see, we just rehash what we mentioned in the opening paragraph, but framed differently. And then let me continue. And as we can see, mathematical anxiety can negatively affect not just the academic achievements of the students, but also their future career plans and total well-being. Notice how serious the problem is if we don't address the problem. If we left that unchecked, look, it will jeopardize the academic achievements and the future career of the student. Or we can even push the idea further, that if we don't address this problem, then it will again jeopardize the quality of instruction in that school or the entire educational system. We will be producing half-baked graduates. And if that is the case, if we think deeply as writers, as scholars, it will also affect, let's say, national development, because human resources are important aspects, factor in national development. And so if we continue, if our educational system continue to produce half-baked graduates, if our quality of education is, if our education is not quality of quality, is not of quality, then it will negatively affect national development, and so on and so forth. So you see, we articulated here the research problem, the research gap. And so even if you don't read the next sentence, you know that, look, this study is important. Knowing the lived experiences of these students is important, because once we know the difficulties and challenges, for example, if it's going to be lived experiences, most of the time it's going to be difficulties and challenges. But not all the time, of course, because when I say lived experiences, we can also talk about happy moments, like lived experiences of newly married females who are virgins, with the lack of a better example, anyway. Well, what I'm just trying to say is it's going to be lived experiences, could be both negative and positive experiences. In this case, we want to know the difficulties and challenges of these students, because once we know how they've been faring in that subject, the teacher will be in the best position to offer some alternatives or solution to the problem, which the researcher will develop, articulate fully in the recommendation part of the thesis. I will produce another video lecture on that. We're still in the introductory part on how to write the research proposal. So again, let me read again the first two sentences so that you will make sense of the last two. Given the aforementioned discussion, it is evident that there are indeed students in Granha Kalinawan National High School who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. And as we can see, mathematical anxiety can negatively affect not just the academic achievement of the students, but also their future career plans and total well-being. Therefore, in an effort to address the problem of the increasing number of students who show disinterest in the subject, not just in Granha Kalinawan National High School, but in the Philippines or in the world as a whole, the researcher, we now re-articulate the research goal. The researcher attempts to determine the lived experiences of these students with mathematical anxiety. As already mentioned, Knowing and understanding the difficulties and challenges that these students have encountered will put the researcher in the best position to offer some alternatives in addressing this problem. We have an excellent, beautifully written background of the study. And then after that, we have this bad habit, bad practice in the country. I observe this in many universities in the Philippines, that after the background of the study, we have the section on statement of the problem. I will produce another video lecture on how to formulate the statement of the problem, because ideally, this is not the statement of the problem. What happened? This is simply the research questions, and the research questions are simply the breakdown of the problem of the research. Hence, again, this is not the thesis statement. These are just questions. These are just research questions. But anyway, my point is, we provided this section because we are following the format of the university. And since we're quite obedient, even if we don't agree with this, I told my advisee, okay, we will just follow that one. But I explained to my advisee that this is not the right thing to do. But don't worry, again, I will produce another video lecture on how to frame or formulate the statement of the problem. Because ideally, after because my point is, the statements of the problem is precisely your background of the study. What we were doing so far, all of this is what we call statements of the problem. In some universities in Europe, they call this section background of the study and statements of the problem. In my other in the video lecture that I promised, a PhD student in Rhode Island University in the United States call this, instead of background of the study, statement of the problem. Okay? Ideally, this is supposed to be the statement of the problem. Okay? In some universities in Europe, they have the background of the study and statement of the problem. Again, I will produce another video lecture on that as part of our course, Education 505, or Research Seminar and Practicum. So what we were doing so far, all of this, the background of the study is also at the same time the statements of the problem. We are stating the research problem that we want to see addressed in the paper and the compelling reasons why we need to do it and the research goal. And then after we state the problem, after we articulate the problem, the research problem, the research goal, and these statements, we then write the research questions. Normally, in my research articles, we just simply say, for example, here we could just, after stating the thesis statements, you can simply write this just for an example. Just an example, we may say this is guided by the following questions. Okay. And then what we will do is simply, we have now the statements of the problem and the research questions. Okay. But then again, the format of the graduate school has this. And I also observed this in many universities in the Philippines. So we will just follow that one for the meantime. So after that, we have the, of course, statement of the problem. But anyway, I will produce again another video lecture on how to on the statement of the problem, a specific topic on that, similar to what we were doing, but I will explain more techniques on how to do that. But meantime, we are done with the presentation and discussion of a background of the study written using the inductive style of writing. Okay, that's all for now. I hope you learned from this presentation. And if you have questions, and if I had the time, if you have questions, you may write that in the comment section below, and I will try to find time to answer that. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.